Bill Peduto is here. He was the Democratic Pittsburgh City Councilman from 2002 to 2014, and then two-term mayor from 2014 to 2021. He is an alumnus of Chartiers Valley High School, Penn State University, and received his master's in public policy from the University of Pittsburgh. While on city council, as mayor, he created several new departments like permits, licenses, and inspections, mobility and infrastructure, and innovation and performance, and oversaw an expansion of the city park system. We are pleased to have him on the program. Welcome.
Hey, wow, you got a lot of people there.
Yeah, we have a whole studio audience in front of us, everyone assembled on my street just for you. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is great. To what do we owe this honor? What have you been up to? Welcome.
Wow, those are two interesting questions. First of all, I kept a low profile over the past year and 4 months, and didn't really do any interviews. And I heard that you were putting this together, and I remember back in the good old days in the aughts, when the blogosphere rolled political commentary, and that you decided to put the spurs back and put the gun back on the belt and get back out there. I thought it would be fun to join you. Secondly, I've been doing consulting work mainly. I did take a couple of months off. The transition was rough. Not anything that you would think like, I'm not the mayor anymore or anything like that. But when you run at 45 RPMs for about 30 years and you work all week, 7 days a week in insane hours, and then you go back to the 33 RPM world, the silence is deafening. I mean, there's a reason people choose to get into fields like politics. Your body is just geared that way. It's not like you're saying, woe is me, I had to work all day and all night. You want to. And then when you don't have a schedule that is complete through an entire day, it's not like you just wake up one day and say, hey, I think I'm going to learn how to play guitar. So it took a few months, and it wasn't really until June that I started getting back out and doing things. And I work for a cybersecurity firm. It's a global firm that they put together a very small team. That our job is to build a very short and fast runway into municipal services, and President Biden put $1.2 billion into the Infrastructure Act that will be going to cities by the third quarter of this year, and we want to be able to compete. And I've been spending a lot of time with that. I've been working with Carnegie Mellon University and the Heinz College, and looking really to expand that role beyond just being in residence. But I've been talking to the administration there about the idea of creating a lab that works on urban issues. And I've been doing a lot of one and dones, working with Strong Cities Network out of London, the Global Covenant of Mayors out of Brussels. I was asked by the State Department to travel to India on a peace mission, subnational diplomacy, reaching out to the Muslim, Buddhist, Sikh, and Hindu communities and meeting with the leaders there. And I took a little time to go down to Goa and meet up with the hippie leaders while I was there as well.
We all saw your Instagram feed, and we all enjoyed kind of getting to take that trip along with you a little bit. I was just a little curious, because people were asking me that it's CMU, right, where you're an executive in residence. People aren't familiar with that term. What is an executive in residence? What do they? And you said you wanted to expand it and create more of a thing, but was just curious how that works.
Fact, there's CMU has had executives in residence. Thank you. I get the title mixed up, but for years now at Heinz. And in many cases, what they'll do is they'll teach a course. So they won't be full faculty, but they'll be a member of the faculty. They aren't a tenured professor by any means, but they're a part of the teaching in different graduate programs. And my case is a little bit different. I didn't feel that kids that were spending that much money should have a guy with a master's degree teaching their course. So I've been doing more of a one-on, one-off, being able to bring some people to the university that I've known in the past to be able to do a little bit of the guest lecturing with some of the folks, and working more along the arrangements of public relations. What I want to expand that into, though, is to be able to create partnerships with these global organizations that work in urbanism, so that Carnegie Mellon is partnering with them and that they have a location here in Pittsburgh. So whether it's the Strong Cities Network, whether it's the work that we were doing with the Marshall Plan, whether it's some of these other groups that have an interest in economic development, technology, and the ability to put it around urban policy, I can provide my services as a bridge to bringing those groups together, and in fact help to raise the money in order to be able to create more programming for the students at Carnegie Mellon and giving them more opportunities on campus and off.
I was also curious about your the consult. Now, is the cybersecurity work, is that being done through your business, the Sabian Consulting?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sabian.
they're Sabian
Like
Consulting. Trabian, Sabian Consult, and they're one client that Sabian has. You mentioned another. I don't know if you can discuss your clients that your business has, but and the reason I ask is because there was a recent article in the Scab newspaper that seemed to throw some shade, as in, like, it said, oh, Mayor Peduto, says on his Twitter page he claims he has a consulting business. So, but we know that he has a one client in the cybersecurity. I was just curious if you could talk a little more about your business and,
Yeah,
flesh it out a little.
Armor is the name of the company.
Armor.
R-M-O-R,
Okay.
like armor.
Oh, okay.
Represents the Colombian Air Force, banks throughout the world, all different types of organizations with a one-of-a-kind cybersecurity software that was designed and created by a special unit of the Israeli army. Oh. And they have technology beyond what our own Department of Defense has. We never have to enter your building. We're able to provide 24/7 digital shield around any type of the operation of your business. And not only that, but any third party that you've worked with in the past, so they're a Trojan horse. And the work that I'm doing, though, is very specified to being able to create that model, not working in the software part of it, but to build pilot programs and get off the ground in the United States cities, counties, regions, and then be prepared to bid on RFPs that will be coming out through a major grant that the federal government put out. I've also worked with other clients like Resource X, who we worked with in city government and creating a way of creating performance-based budgeting that goes around priorities. And in our case, we built an entire new model that hadn't been used in the country before around sustainability in meeting our climate action goals and holding every department accountable for it, not just one part of city planning. Did a keynote for the Global Covenant of Mayors, and all this comes through Sabian. Sabian is an S corporation that is named after the three brothers that I lost. During the time as mayor, I lost everyone in my immediate family. So Samuel was my brother Tom's middle name. Bernard was my brother David's middle name. And Anthony was my brother Guy's middle name. So the company is named after them. And then there's a bunch of other work that is done through Sabian that is just one and dones. But my goal is, what I do with CMU is a 1099. What I do with Sabian, it goes through an S corporation, and being able to keep the books the way they need to be.
The only thing I know about S corporations is that there are 100 shares of them. did I get, like, are you selling shares? Are you, can people partner up, or, hostile takeover? Is that kind of thing in the picture, or what?
Not that I ever hope.
Okay. But,
Yeah.
uh,
It serves as a sole proprietorship through tax purposes. And if I were to take a position in an administration or do a leave of absence, it would allow me to be able to continue to operate a company with somebody else. I wouldn't be able to receive the revenues. But when putting this together during the first 2 months of this past year, it seemed to make the most sense.
well, you sound very busy over this past year, after decompressing from the mayoralty, not having a chief of staff and an assistant to push you and tell you where to go.
I got to tell you, man, and that's been one of the hardest things. I have found I am my worst administrator. I still have invoices from last year that people owe me for travel, that owe me for hotel. I have not even sent them a bill.
Right. Well, that's life for most of us who don't have full offices like that. But
Right.
it's nice to hear that you are pursuing these other consulting work and still involved with government and stuff. Because I don't want to spend forever on this because of what's been in the news, we're all a little worried and concerned. There was some kind of they called it an altercation in the media, and it all sounded very mysterious, like no one wanted to mention much or talk this about that. I just wanted to give you as much an opportunity to address, like, okay, so what happened? Was there anything to it? Did you pick the fight with these people? Was it, everyone wants to know. Just give us the lowdown real quick.
It's I don't even know. I first went to Cappy's back in 1998. No, 1988. So how many ever years that is of going to that bar, and it's the only bar I go to. I don't hang out around town. I don't run around. I have a local bar. I'm single. I live by myself, and I don't entertain at my house. But I know everyone that hangs out there. So if I want to watch a Penguins game, I'm not going to sit by myself in my house. I'm going to go down there and watch the game there with friends of mine. So in all those years since 1988, I can count on one hand the number of fights that I've gotten into. One. And that was a couple weeks ago. And, I know we're going to talk about politics in a little bit. And I just am happy to be out of it in a way because it's become vulgar. It hasn't become extreme. It's become vulgar to the point where people feel that they can say anything about anyone on social media, and there should never be a repercussion from it. That they should just be able to put poison out, but never be able to have to live with the poison that they spread. And the same thing happens, unfortunately, in life. And I had one of those incidents happen to me. And, there was a group of people that came in. They were 24 and 25 years old. I spoke to them. I knew, they had graduated from Pitt a couple of years ago, and we had a wonderful conversation. We were talking. And,
so you knew them from before, or you met them and got them to know a little earlier that evening? Okay.
No, they came in. They knew who I was. They came over and started talking. I was with a buddy of mine who's a top administrator at the University of Pittsburgh, and two of the young women were a part of one of the schools that he's involved in, and he was explaining to them what they should be doing on internship opportunities, whether they should pursue a PhD. He said, you're basically my daughter's age. She's working for NBC News now in DC. And if she didn't have that internship opportunity in Mayor Peduto's office and then got the opportunity at WESA, she never would have had that internship at NBC News that led her to the job. And he was explaining the paths to career. I guess one of the guys got upset about we were talking to them. I'm not sure. He never really said anything. He sat down next to me and was polite, and we were talking, and he was asking about what it's like to be a mayor and having a conversation like I do all the time. And then he became offensive and vulgar. And I said, very matter-of-factly, that's offensive. And when the bartender heard me say that, he came down towards that end of the bar. And the guy continued and to become more offensive. And I said, that's personally offensive. Get the F out of here.
Oh, okay.
He didn't move. He just stared at me. And the bartender said, you are out. And he threw him out of the bar. And as his friends were gathering themselves together, and they were leaving the bar as well, he had paid the whole tab. The largest guy of the group, I'll call him Big Guy, was the last person out. And he said something to me. And I just looked and I'm just like, get out, just get out. And he went and there's like a window at the door and he just stared at me from the window. And I just ignored it and talked with my friends, talked to the bartender, and they're like, this is so ridiculous that this type of behavior has become accepted, normalized, and constant. And I thought it was all over. And all of a sudden, the big guy came back in and he looked at me and shouted a very offensive thing. And then he shouted a second thing. And I was in an area where I'm surrounded by three corners. So I stood up and with two hands, I pushed him back.
Ooh,
I got out
okay.
of that little space.
Oh, okay, so he sort of cornered you or got in your space, and when you pushed him back, that was sort of like, so you laid hands on him first, but it was sort of like to escape kind of a deal or to give yourself space? I'm just trying to picture what's going on.
I had a bar, a wall, and a wall.
Okay.
So I just pushed. He then said something else. I pushed again. He pushed me. And the next thing I knew, I was laying on my back with my head hit off the ground. What I didn't realize was a third guy came in from that same group. And he was at the door and he put his arm around me and then slew-footed me to the ground. And I hit hard. And I was the one who called the police. And I was the one who gave the report to the police. And I was asked if I was going to press charges, and I said no. These kids are 24, 25 years old. I know where the one kid works because he was mentioning it. I know where two of the women are going to school. I'm not out to ruin their lives. But what I asked the officer was, could I talk to them? And he said no, that it would not be de-escalating the situation. And I assured him I wouldn't raise my voice. But I just wanted to remind folks, number one, you don't do that. When I was 24, 25, I wasn't looking for a 58-year-old guy to throw on the floor. Number two, if you have differences in politics, that's good. That's called democracy. We shouldn't all agree. And number three, you never know what the other person has or what their story is. If it weren't me and they did that, you don't know if that person has a gun. You don't know how it could escalate into all the work that you did to get to this point in your life could be eliminated. You don't think of those things. So I took the hit and I sat there and I talked to my friend and we stayed for a while to just calm down. But, unfortunately, back in my day when I got involved in politics, that wasn't even something that you would think about. We couldn't even imagine. We didn't even be in a movie. And today, we live in a much different world, and I'm happy I'm out of politics.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing where we're more accustomed to complaining about it, how coarse and how mean things have gotten on the internet. We all used to say, we turn into angrier people on the internet. And it used to be, at least there, it did sort of become, Socratic debate really doesn't seem to be changing anyone's mind. Professional campaigns don't seem to be using that either. They typically use humiliate the other person, make whoever you're arguing with feel stupid and ashamed, and that's how you advance the discourse. And And that was pretty good for the internet.
That's 100% it, and it is. It has never proven effective. Number one, it makes for very unhealthy people. Number two, you can't live in an area where you're putting poison and negativity into yourself, where you don't become negative and poisoned by it. And so when you see these people on social media who are constantly attacking and just doing it for the sake of being able to get into somebody else's face, whether it is literally in somebody else's face or through words and social media posts, you have to realize that that negativity has built up so much within them that hopefully they can't control it, because if they are controlling it, then it's a different issue that you're dealing with. But that it is something that is has them in a bad mental place.
Yeah. Well, the only part I disagree with is that you said that it's not very effective. And I've seen it, and it's unfortunate, but I've sort of seen sometimes, they call it cyberbullying just almost as a joke. And like I said, it's that more, we're going to try to make really clear who are the cool kids in the cafeteria and who are the lamoids in the cafeteria. And it seemed like, and maybe this started, 2016 through 2017, I've seen it work and I've felt it work on myself. Let's put it that way. Of course, maybe I got sick of it and we're starting to tilt in the other direction because Twitter has just become such a extreme cesspool, and maybe we all got tired of it and saw the same thing play out a few times. I sort of don't feel as strongly that I like that I respond to that kind of behavior as I used to. But what I wanted to ask you before we're not going to spend forever on the incident, and I don't want to hear exactly the nasty things that he called you or he said, because I don't care.
I wouldn't repeat them.
I am curious, was there a political element to it? Like, were they saying, oh, you let too many Syrian refugees in, or, oh, you let UPMC off the hook? Like, which kind of angle?
It wasn't that nuanced.
Okay.
And it wasn't that polite.
Uh-huh.
But it made reference to my politics.
All right. From the left or from the right? I'm just,
I don't really want to get into it.
Oh, okay.
I if I really wanted to do something, I would have filed charges that night.
Okay.
Or filed charges the next day. But I chose not to. Or I would have gone on the TV stations when they were all calling. This is the only time I'll ever talk about this, and this is the most detail I'll ever give. And I just hope for a better world. I'll do everything I can to be able to make the world a little bit better. And I hope for those three young men that it was a big wake-up call. And they woke up the next day and they realized, number one, they could have killed me. My head hit the ground hard enough to throw my glasses off of my head. And I take a blood thinner for AFib, and had it something bled, I would have not woken up. And their lives would forever have been different.
Are you fully recovered from the ordeal, or are you still
a little bit of threw me hard. I got slammed. I'll be honest.
So you're still, but you're not even, you didn't even exchange information with the I'm going to call them punks, with the punks, or
after they threw me to the ground, they left.
Okay, but you're doing a lot better. I hope.
You mean healing-wise?
Yeah, healing-wise, yeah.
I played hockey through college. I got thrown to the ground a number of times. I had all of my teeth chipped. I broke my collarbone twice. I'd like to think that I'm still that kid.
All right.
But I haven't gotten in a scuffle since college. And if anybody that you would talk to at Cappy's would say, I'm the most unlikely person to be involved in anything like that, let alone start something like that.
Right. So you're back at Cappy's. You're back at your living room in your third place. That's great.
Watching the playoffs without the Penguins and trying to figure which team I want to root for.
It's been a while, yeah. But the Pirates are taking all of the wins, so we get to enjoy that too. From what I understand.
New life, I got to go to the first day game and just sit there and enjoy a beautiful afternoon. And I was going to go next Thursday to the game, but you're looking at Penn State's Alumni of the Year for the Department of Political Science. So I'm going to go up and receive my reward, which is very undeserved. Because anybody who would decide to give me an award for my undergraduate years really didn't look at the transcript.
Well, is there a are they bringing you back? Are you going to give a speech about what you did? Are they going to do a little fundraising over it and stuff like that? Okay.
I don't know about the fundraising, but I'm going up early to be with the students and with the faculty, and then there's a banquet, and then the next day they have their own board and they're having their board meeting and stuff. And I'm going to take a slow drive back through Central PA and hopefully see some of the spring happening in the mountains, and then I got to get back for my girl. Who's at my feet.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, can you bring up the puppy real quick? This would be a cute, intimate moment.
She's sleeping.
Never mind. Don't. Yeah.
No. She's stretching. Hold on.
Okay.
She's got a. Are you gonna stand? Oh, here she is. Oh, love of my life. Big sack of potatoes.
Oh my! See, you shouldn't go anywhere without that dog. That was your first mistake. That should be a Cappy's friendly animal. Hello.
I'll get you. You know that this little girl's going to be at a Westinghouse Bulldog game.
No, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, she's an English Bulldog.
Does she have a job now? She's the Bulldog.
Yeah, she's full name's Bertha Smuckler Peduto. I bought her off of a young Amish couple outside of Lancaster. And she is just a big sack of potatoes.
Cute puppy.
Yep.
So we were gonna talk politics. And you had mentioned that because I started getting involved it was the end of 2006, and we mentioned 2006 and 2007, 2008 were some particularly crazy years, even by Pittsburgh standards. Are you finding any similarities between the vibe in 2007, 8 and the vibe around now? Just how there's all of these offices up for grabs, and it seems like...
Without a doubt. So, like, you see what's happening now, and it's a youth-generated change. And back when we were doing it and we were the youth, there weren't enough of us to really bring about the change, but we brought about a lot of the noise, and then we brought about a lot of legislative change. And we created, at that time, which was the second progressive movement in Pittsburgh, the first happening back in 1910, and the second happening around 2001. We were able to elect officials and work together with Patrick Dowd, Natalia Rudiak, Doug Shields, Daniel Lavelle. There was, back in that time, I was the only person who endorsed Ed Gainey for state rep in 2006. And then one of the few people in 2012. Salah Udine and I were the only people to endorse Jake Wheatley for state representative. Bruce Krause, Aaron Mulchaney. We had this group that we had, who I called the architect, Matt Merriman Preston, who utilized technology and creating algorithms around databases for voter turnout.
Matt Merriman, Preston campaign consultant, manager, et cetera, just to let people know that.
The old network and the old machine didn't have, they were still using Allegheny County generated super voter lists. So we were able to do more with less. And it became very successful. 2006, 2007, when Bob O'Connor died, there was a void. And the reason that council had made Luke the president was because we were so divided still over Act 47 that we could not get anybody who had voted and been involved in that 5 votes. So it was basically, well, can we agree on the young guy? And it was sort of, okay, that's what will happen. And then I'm not being critical, but
Of course not.
the job of mayor is very, very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to have life experience. You can't just jump in there and be ready to tackle what is going to be not just the mechanics of the job, but being in the situation where a bank president is at war with somebody else and you have to put yourself in the middle in order to mediate. And you just can't be 24 years old and be in that situation.
I remember right at the jump, whenever he ascended to mayor, or we called him interim mayor at the time because he was filling a vacancy. Almost right away, UPMC, that's when they started the Pittsburgh Promise Scholarship. And
2007.
There was very quickly a fight about, because the school board had decided, okay, thank you for your generosity, and also, if it should ever happen that we can tax you, we're going to give you tax credits for your philanthropy.
Correct.
And at the time, the city said, wait a minute, no, we don't like that deal. It's a scholarship. It's its own.
Sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, no, what happened was when they cut the deal, and this was Roosevelt and Ravenstall with UPMC. UPMC was giving $100 million to build the Pittsburgh Promise.
Over like 10 years or something, right?
Yeah, and they actually paid it off sooner rather than later in later years. But the deal was, and the school board voted, that they would never be able to take taxes from UPMC in return for this $100 million, even if the state overturned the law and said that UPMC was not tax exempt. And this is the other thing, it doesn't get reported. Ed Gainey's suit against UPMC does not affect the schools. It doesn't mean that the schools will automatically get money as well. They're going to have to do their own process, go through their own lawsuits, and do it all over again. The PUP Act only applies to the one government agency. It doesn't go across the board and says, number one, it doesn't say that everything UPMC has is now taxable. You're going to be going after the MRI center at Shadyside and the gift shop at Presby and the parking lot. You can't say UPMC is not tax exempt. And that's what 90% of people who support this action believe. And they also believe that the schools will benefit and the county will benefit. That's not true.
Help me understand how it works.
The schools have already said they can't take it. Now, real quick.
Because of what happened 15 years ago, they can never take taxes from UPMC. 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
I mean, UPMC will, if the schools do try and take it, they'll come out with and show there was a school board vote that said that we don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know if that will survive in court, but that was the deal for the Pittsburgh Promise. But there was another part of the deal. UPMC wanted the same deal from the city of Pittsburgh. And I was at that council meeting.
I remember this.
When Jim Hudson had in his pocket legislation that none of us had seen. And it came directly from the administration. And at the end of the meeting, he introduced a bill. And in the bill, it said that the city of Pittsburgh will never be able to tax UPMC. Never.
For all time. Well, yeah.
And so he introduces it. And then he says to the clerk, I want to waive the rules of council so we can vote on this tomorrow. And 5 members of council voted yes. And it was on the agenda for the next day. And I went crazy. And I got everybody that I could find to be able to call council members and say, delay this for a public hearing. Delay it for a public hearing. And then I called Jeffrey Romoff personally as a council member, and I said, this is going to backfire very badly. And the idea that they thought, that they said, was that they never asked for it. It was offered to them. And through the efforts of myself and Doug Shields, basically leading this, That law never passed in the city of Pittsburgh, which now allows us the opportunity to look at UPMC for either payments in lieu of taxes, which is the old model, suing them for basically pennies on the dollar. When we did the analysis, it wasn't even worth the cost of fighting. Or a new model where we go and we look at what the critical needs of the community are, what our missions are, align them not just with UPMC, but with Allegheny Health Networks and Blue Cross Blue Shield, with Carnegie Mellon, with the University of Pittsburgh, with Duquesne, with Giant Eagle, with PNC, and create an account like other cities have to be able to do all the critical functions that fall outside of government and what government is responsible for. And that's what mayors do.
So many things to follow up on there. First of all, because you just said which other cities do. Which other cities have a setup like the one Pittsburgh?
Almost every major city.
Almost every major city does. Okay.
Yeah, there's funds that usually are called mayor's funds, and they're worked through different for-profits, non-profits in order to be able to do things. Bloomberg had one of the best, so we engaged with Bloomberg's chief, who was in charge of creating it, and we worked with her to be able to create ours. Oakland, California, Libby Schaff's been able to do amazing things. You know, the basic duties of local government are public works and public safety. When you want to be able to affect people who are dealing and suffering through crises, whether it is through homelessness or whether it is through addiction, or whether it's just through basic changes that are happening in their lives, that usually falls to the county government that deals with health and human services. But it's acute in urban areas where poverty is high. You need to have a function where there's a capacity that falls outside of local government, outside of county government, and to get others to play into that. That's how we built the shelter. We would never have been able to build that homeless shelter if there was a lawsuit against a nonprofit. That bridge is now burned. So Bill Demchek from PNC Bank and I met in my office, and he said, give me one thing to do to be able to deal with the homeless situation downtown.
Well, PNC is a for-profit, so...
yes, but yeah. He was able then to recruit UPMC and Allegheny Health Networks to fund it along with them. And then we gave the land. But what we needed was a no-barrier shelter. If you go to some of these other shelters, you're going to be dealing with, if you're drunk, they're turning you away. If you're addicted, they may not welcome you. You may have a dog.
A dog, yeah.
So what we needed was a shelter that had no barriers, was 24/7, and that people could actually need. Now we need 3 more. And with our administration,
3 more you think we need, like downtown?
We helped to fund 5 shelters during 8 years in our administration. We worked to create a state-of-the-art with Light of Life, from conception to all the way building through and getting grant money and investing in order to build a new one. We worked with the YWCA in the Hill and invested to make it happen. Salvation Army. We were working with Bethlehem Haven until the last month in order to be able to expand their services for women. We ended the program where we would go into any area where homeless people were at and would evict them. That was the old policy of the city of Pittsburgh. We used police cars and public works in order to treat a problem as chronic homelessness with that type of an approach. Instead, what we did is we created the Office of Community Health Services, and we partnered with Allegheny General Hospital and being able to work with Mercy Behavioral. And we had people in the field. We gave 3 ambulances so that there could be 24/7 assistance to be able to help people. And we created a new model that never existed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. As far as that model goes, in order to ask this question, I'll move off homelessness and we'll talk about affordable housing, because that was part of the one Pittsburgh, one of the issues that it was supposed to address too, right?
Well, under the one PGH plan that was approved.
One PGH,
where the each of the universities and the hospitals signed off on, UPMC was going to dedicate $40 million strictly to affordable housing over 5 years. Just remember, this sunset in 5 years, it could come back, you know, and by the way, the nonprofit still exists. One PGH still exists. It's just that the administration has chosen to withdraw.
The Gainey administration. Okay.
Yeah. But it still has a board.
Here's what I think people were afraid of, that UPMC and your administration, or whoever the mayor's administration is, would get together and figure out, okay, between the two of you, or frankly, you know, since UPMC has the money, they would decide what kind of affordable housing they were interested in building, you know, 10 stories tall or 10 blocks long or this way or that way or whatever. At the end of the day, they would pick, okay, it's going to be in this neighborhood. We're going to need this allowance as far as roads and so, you know. So they basically design it, and then it becomes one of those deals where, you know, it falls at the planning commission and city council, and the public shows up, and the message to them is, well, this is what the funders want to do. If you don't like it for whatever reason, you know, you'd better like it, because otherwise you're leaving money on the table and you're going to get nothing. Because we see that sometimes with projects that are funded and planned, you know, before they get the public process, that it's like, well, you're then given an if you don't like it, lump it situation. And I think people were leery that, you know, oh boy, now we're electing UPMC as our new city council person, basically.
No, but that's not the case. There's function of government is determined by city code. And it does not preclude a nonprofit from being formed. A nonprofit can be formed for any purpose, and it doesn't take away the zoning rights or the planning rights or any of the other rights of city council. They don't have their same rights. It's like saying that, well, we don't like Habitat for Humanity, and so we don't want them dictating and then becoming their own council member. It's only because it's big bad UPMC that people think this way. It's if you put any other nonprofit in that and say that the United Way is going to give and work to create $40 million worth of affordable housing, people would be standing up and cheering.
If it was affordable housing where they wanted it to go and how they wanted it to look.
Well, who doesn't?
All that stuff.
If somebody
that's true.
Habitat does it all the time. Veterans Place does it all the time. And we work with them in order to be able to do it. What we were looking at was over $120 million over 5 years to deal with all of the critical issues around social services and about creating a more equitable city that would be able to address it. Not in the government sector, which we already spend 600 plus million in operating, another 200 million in capital, and then all of the authority money as well. So we're over $1 billion, but a supplement to be able to do even more. And to say that, and that supplement has to be controlled by city council, and city council must have a vote over a nonprofit that is simply willing to help poor people, just killed $120 million worth of help for poor people. It killed it. You took $120 million away from poor people because you didn't like something that you couldn't control. That's crazy.
I think people do like their idea of control if it's, because, you know, if it's a public, you know, in their government, they don't like that. They don't like that idea as much, I think. But the other thing that one PGH had going against it, which I remember pretty clearly, and I do remember you saying that, like, well, we were working on a lot of things and the pandemic bumped a lot back severely. And in a more perfect world, maybe you would have been able to propose this another half a year or full year before you did. It came out, late March of 2021?
Yeah.
Which...
Not my choosing. I tried and I pushed as much as I could in order to get something done before the campaign year. and not for political purposes, but realizing that that would be the narrative that, and then by the time we were in the campaign, it was a conversation that I had with the chairman of the board of UPMC, Nick Beckwith, and saying to him, I don't understand why there can't be a consensus. It was more so with why we weren't able to get it done quickly of how much are they paying? Well, if he's paying that, I want to pay that. It was more of the four more concerned about what was on the other person's plate than saying, we will create after school programs that will teach kids coding. We'll provide financial incentives for low income women to be able to have healthy births. We'll do, in picking and deciding from the list that wasn't cultivated by them. It was cultivated by 2 to 3 years of meetings over what are the critical needs of the city of Pittsburgh. And if you go back to my 2013 campaign and you see my 100 ideas in 100 days.
Is that page still out there, actually?
Way back machine, I'm sure.
Okay.
But number one was, we're going to redo the Pittsburgh survey. The Pittsburgh survey, I think, was done in 1908. And it looked at Pittsburgh's needs from a socioeconomic viewpoint. And it was the first study like it done in this country. And it directly resulted in Pittsburgh's first progressive movement, when the progressives came in and started to clean up and reform government, not just policy ideas to help all, but the idea of government reform is a big part historically of the true progressive movement. And what we did is we utilized the gender equity report to be our Pittsburgh survey, to say that through the Gender Commission, that disparity is real within the city of Pittsburgh based upon gender. But when you add race to it, it becomes even worse. And what ended up happening is, once we presented this report in order to be able to say, now what are the underlying causes and how are we going to raise the money to fix this? The report was taken by a group of activists and poked in our eye and said, this is your fault, without any understanding that we're the ones that created it.
I was going to ask, do you regret having your government produce that report, because it was sort of used as, okay, well, Exhibit A, under Peduto's government, black women are not doing so good.
No, not at all. We were recognized by the United Nations for being and having the guts in order to say, here's the warts in our own city, and we have to do something about it. And we not only did that, but we put it up against benchmark cities that are similar to us. I often hear people say, we're the worst in the nation. We're not the worst in the nation. We're not even the worst in Allegheny County. But when looking at cities that are like us, we are at the bottom. That doesn't mean we're at the bottom of the entire nation. That doesn't mean we're at the bottom of Allegheny County or the state of Pennsylvania. But when we look at what we could be doing based upon the resources that we have, we fail. And yes, we put that out, and that then became Exhibit A for us of why CMU and Pitt and UPMC and Allegheny Health Network had to work with us to solve these problems. And one of the recommendations that came out of that report, and looking directly at what the Gender Equity Commission requested and said had to happen, was a guaranteed basic income pilot for the city of Pittsburgh.
And you said that program was kiboshed, the guaranteed basic income pilot program. Was that because of legal reasons, as far as, how can government pick and choose who it's going to?
No, and the sad part is folks in the media knew that too. And, you can go back looking at the NLC guidelines of how the federal funds could be utilized that were provided to cities throughout the country. And you can also go and look at other cities that are utilizing those funds for the guaranteed basic income. Fortunately, there have been at least 50 cities since last year that have joined Mayor Tubbs' pilot, former Mayor Tubbs of Stockton, California. Two universities that are working on this. What the goal is to show that when people have access to money, and it's not put into a little area that says you have to use it to buy powdered milk, you can actually work to get yourself out of poverty. And you use different groups to do that. Sorry, my dog's eating a box. You use a group that is your targeted group, and then you use a control group. And that study is ongoing as we speak. Unfortunately, Pittsburgh is no longer a part of it.
Before we move on from the gender equity study, the gender and race equity study, just in order to address what the problem is, that whether you call it the worst in the nation or world, or say, well, okay, it's fairly bad here, the disparities are fairly bad here. If those disparities didn't come from Bill Peduto taking over in 2013 and making things bad, obviously, what is your spin on how things have gotten worse than they are in most places when it comes to those disparities here? Just historically, how did we wind up having to confront that?
I'd say the first reason is, and for most people who are, I guess, under the age of 40 don't remember, we went through a depression. And it was a depression that was greater than the Great Depression.
You're talking about the early 80s depression, the regional depression.
Through the 90s, yeah.
Through the 90s, okay.
We didn't get out into a recession until the early 2000s. So what ended up happening is those that found themselves on the margins economically not only got knocked to their knees, but they never were able to get back up from 2004 on. And so you have that one part. A second part that's very controversial, but unfortunately the county statistics are showing it. We lost a lot of poor folks within our African American communities who were able to succeed, and then they moved to the suburbs. And what everyone just wants to call gentrification is actually a two-edged sword. You have to deal with gentrification. You don't want to see people forced out. But when people are choosing to move out, you have one of the greatest percentages of African American increased population in Allegheny County over the past 10 years. And you have the reduction of the African American community in the city. But it's increasing in places like the North Hills, Jefferson Hills, Monroeville. These aren't poverty neighborhoods.
I was going to say, are we finally developing middle-class black neighborhoods in the region? If not necessarily, not in the city, but in the region there are some, or starting to be like that in places.
Some, but the fact is that if you take an approach for the city that we're only going to build affordable housing, and that a neighborhood like Hazelwood, the Hill District, and Homewood can only be for poor people, you're not only doing a disservice for the people who call that neighborhood home, but you're also taking away the opportunity for somebody who's a young professional who wants to live in a historically black neighborhood, but doesn't have an option of having a place that they want to be able to live in. Or somebody who grew up in that neighborhood and wants to be able to stay in that neighborhood, but is now more successful and has other opportunities. We saw it 20 years ago with Penn Hills. We saw it different areas around the adjacent to the north side. We saw it in areas like Carnegie from the West End into Bridgeville. But now we're seeing it all throughout Allegheny County, and the people are moving out of Pittsburgh, not because of gentrification, but because of success and finding places that they want to raise their family. The two biggest issues that we have to deal with in dealing with the communities that are underserved within the city is, number one, crime. And there's nobody in those neighborhoods that's saying defund the police. Nobody. They're saying we want the police like they have in Shadyside. We want the police like they have in Squirrel Hill. You make sure that the police aren't beating up our grandkids. You make sure that the police know us by name and treat us with respect, but you make sure that our community is safe. And the second reason is we're not providing proper housing to a growing community that is now deciding to live elsewhere. And that goes back to why are our numbers not the same as the other areas? Because we have not invested across the board in affordable, subsidized, and market housing. And during our administration, we did. And we got criticized for it. And people didn't like all the apartments being built. But you know what? We raised the revenue of this city 22% in 8 years. We got out of a financial collapse that put us under state oversight. We created a reserve from $100 million. We were able to get our bond rating up to the highest level since the collapse of steel. We averted a pension crisis where the state was going to take it over. And we were able to invest back into capital, into roads, into all the infrastructure that since 2004 saw no investment at all.
I was about to say, in regards to infrastructure, because that one just sort of jumps out, because I mean, I know and I remember well that, you know, what you say about the city building its fund balance and having a rainy day fund, you know, that's all true. There was more financial, you know, responsibility. We stayed in Act 47 longer. We experienced a very rainy day sort of just toward the end of your second term. So we ended up spending a lot of that to keep the lights on. But, and you mentioned yesterday when you were talking about this, we wanted to talk about the Fern Hollow Bridge, and you just mentioned infrastructure. So talk to me a little about, you know, once the Fern Hollow Bridge went down, it seems like everyone in Pittsburgh sort of said like, oh goodness, there's a heck of a lot of deferred maintenance. We weren't doing, you know, a good enough job taking care of when we could have been. I mean, do you regret not shifting more money into, you know, the bridges that Gainey is now scrambling to find money and time in order to keep up?
So this is government 101. That's not how it's done.
Tell me how it's done.
Nowhere. No city, no township, no borough pays to do the upkeep of their bridges.
No, they don't.
70% of the funding comes from the federal government.
Right.
20% of the funding comes from the state. 10% of the funding comes from local government.
Right.
So if you were to try to put more money into the maintenance of bridges, you wouldn't have any money to pay one employee.
However, there is this thing called the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, which is the pass-through for a lot of the federal and state transportation money. And all of it, exactly. And you're seeing the reporters, some reporters go after Mayor Gainey on this, that they're saying, well, no, you, Mr. Mayor, actually get to direct, you sit on that board, so you get to direct that big money. It's federal money, it's state money, but you do get to direct it from, you know, other sorts of infrastructure enhancements, you know, things that whenever your bridges aren't collapsing could be considered, you know, more tinsel or bonus projects. I have a feeling you know where I'm steering with this. But
I realize, but again, so all of the inspection of every bridge in the city is done by the state. It's not done by the city.
That's because we don't have engineers anymore that can inspect them.
Even when we had engineers.
Yeah, and that's because of Act 47. That's not because you got rid of them. I'm not trying to get anyone that idea.
But
yeah,
it's a function of state government, which is the inspection of bridges. So in October, we get the okay. Fern Hollow Bridge is okay. Some minor maintenance issues to deal with, but structurally sound.
That was an okay report that came in October of 2021, I guess, is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I got that. All right.
November, December, 2 months later, the bridge is falling to the ground. This is the information that we have to use in order to be able to prioritize where the needs are on infrastructure. We get an okay from the state saying that Fern Hollow, I mean, do you expect me to like go out there and like with a flashlight or hire another consulting firm after 70 years or 60 years after World War II, whatever the amount of years is that this type of a system has worked? And so that's number one. And it's very important to understand there was no indication whatsoever that there was going to be a failure with this bridge, nor any recommendation by engineers that additional changes needed to be made.
The only thing I recall reading was that they rank things, great, okay, poor, not so good, awful. Are you sure that it got a rating that it was as positive sounding as okay? It wasn't sort of like, poor but not about to fall over on you?
No, it has a name, and I can't recall what the name is, but it sounds bad.
Okay.
But when there was a need to shut down bridges, when we got the report and they said you had to shut them down, we shut them down.
Jog my memory which bridges were shut. There was one on the north side, I think, that needed shut down.
There's one by the north side that's by the aviary. I would have to ask Gilman. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we followed the it wasn't recommendations, it's basically rules. We followed the rules. And then when SPC gets funding, number one, it's federal funding goes to the state. And right off the top, PennDOT takes a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And a certain amount of money goes to this PennDOT district, certain amount to this, and then you have this money that the PennDOT funds will just go to state roads. I'm sorry, but during the Wolf administration, Western Pennsylvania was at the bottom of the list every year. And the money was going to Central and Eastern PA. Mm-hmm. So by the time it gets to us, there's not as much money to be able to utilize. Then PennDOT gets the first pick. We're going to do this PennDOT bridge and this PennDOT bridge and this and then you're left with this amount of money. And when you're left with this amount of money, you're competing against 8 counties. It's not like you get to just say, well, I want my 5 bridges done. You have to pick one if you're lucky. And then you have to have the money to be able to match it. During Act 47, we had no capital budget. We had no money to match. So we weren't even maintaining bridges. And then while we were in office, we upped it significantly. And we put much more money into capital in order to be able to be the match, to be able to get the few that we got thrown to us to assure that they were going to be funded. So it's not done in this way that just, I think people think it's like, well, that bridge looks bad. Why aren't you fixing it? There's a funding mechanism which precludes that type of logic to even be considered. So when Mayor Gainey talks about we're going to identify all the bridges and all the failures, that's great. Mm-hmm. How are you going to pay for it? Right. You can't afford to pay for it without hundreds of millions a year.
For the record, just because we were just talking about, just because we were just talking about one PGH that the philanthropy that you designed with the that would not have. Oh, please don't leave. You're not going anywhere, are you?
I'm turning down the sunlight.
Okay, very good. I was going to ask
eyes.
Because it sounds like some local match is important to get the ball rolling for major infrastructure repair work, but from what I remember, that wasn't a project area of one PGH either. Like we still kind of went up a creek.
There was no capital unless it was specific to a purpose like recreation center, to be able to put in computer labs to have after school programming or something. That's it.
Okay. And it sounds like you sort of pre-denied this question, but since we're talking about bridges, you might have seen on Twitter already, I have my own conspiracy theory, you know that I have those, that because the Mon Oakland Connector was such a prize mission of yours to, bring to the city for a variety of reasons, and in many combinations of how that could have gone. Swinburne Bridge was at times a part of that. At times not, depending upon what the community said. At times it was. But one thing I had wondered was the city holding off on addressing the Swinburne Bridge and maybe conceivably the Charles Anderson Bridge because it was still didn't know what it wanted to do as far as that enhanced mobility that you wanted to bring about. And the community was being recalcitrant and they didn't want it and you wanted it, so it was taking longer.
It's more ignorance. I mean, it's more around what the process is in order to be able to get a bridge on the SPC list. And it's not like that, like I just explained.
Right.
We did get Swinburne. We did get Charles Anderson. They're on the list, not because of a new administration, but because of the number of years it takes in order to get a bridge on it. Yeah. So there's our work in our administration was able to do it. Will we be at the ribbon cutting and will my name appear on it? No. But was the work done in order to be able to get the funding to address that? Yes. And the Montfayette connector, or Montfayette,
watch yourself.
The Mont-Oakland connector. Yeah, I was very wedded to it. It was an environmentally sensitive, technologically advanced transit system that would be available to anyone to be able to connect Hazelwood, which is going to see the largest economic development potentially in the city's history, to Oakland. And it went along a public right-of-way where diesel engines run with chemicals that we don't even know.
You're talking about the train that goes through there, yeah.
Electric vehicle that carried 8 people and made a sound like boop, 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 was so horrible, but the train is fantastic and we can sleep at night listening to the train. So number one, I thought that was very unrealistic to say that we don't want it. I think again, it's because Pitt will be down there, Carnegie Mellon will be down there, UPMC will be down there. If it was Little Sisters of the Poor, would have the connector. Number two, now that we don't have the connector, now the Gainey administration is going to have to work to get money to build an exit ramp off of the Parkway East to connect the Parkway East to Oakland, which will mean more cars, more traffic, more pollution, more traffic into the neighborhood. And that money could have gone to put into our bridges, but instead we're going to build an exit ramp. And we'll probably have to expand greatly Bates Street, which was a point of contention of whether or not. So good job, you killed that project, but you just made us now even more dependent on the automobile, on pollution, and on extending roadways instead of building bridges.
I'm sure a lot of the activists down in that corner would say, well, our solution to that is, more public transit. Let's put I forget which bus is theirs, but they're saying, well, let's add more routes of that bus. Let's put more buses on 2nd Avenue that service Hazelwood and Glen Hazel, et cetera.
Yep.
But that's operating funds, I guess.
Yeah, and what you'd end up with is a big empty steel mill lot because there wouldn't be any bank that would finance that as even being a starter of a conversation, let alone a realistic option of how you're going to get people to that site. You can't rely upon 1960s technology of transit and say that that's the only model that we're willing to accept. And then imagine having somebody come in to put $3 billion worth of development in and be able to get the financing for it. Again, it's not, you're making it sound so simple. It's complex. It involves many, many different parts. And if the big concern was that would not be public transit and somehow that would hurt the workers, I was endorsed by the bus drivers union, and I got in writing from both the Heinz Endowments and RK Mellon that all the workers on that system would be part of their union.
I'm going to wrap this piece up, but like I said,
Hey, Brian, I got to go.
Oh, yeah, you do? Okay.
I would say, if you have one more question, I'm fine, but Yeah, it's now after 5. We're going on 2 hours.
Oh yeah, we've zoomed along. I don't know. This may be too this may be too large of a question to ask toward the very end. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was because you said there was a group of, you mentioned a few times, there was a group of activists who took things in another direction, and because we talked a little about this earlier, and I wanted to know if there was any time you could sort of provide the historical perspective as far as what Pittsburgh United was, and your role in at one point in time being one of those activists, and sort of the phases that they went through, that you and them went through, that brought you up through 2021 and what we're looking at now.
Yeah, well, I mean, in what it is now, it was very much different back when we created it. I know that's going to really upset some of the activists, but going back to the time of 2007 and then 2008, a group of us, mainly Gabe Morgan from SEIU 32BJ and myself, put together a coalition of service employee unions, faith-based leaders, community organizers, and environmentalists. And we worked to create an agenda within City Council that would do several things. We were able to pass all of it, and in that created this organization that is now basically in its iteration that it is now with Pittsburgh United. We were able to create prevailing wage legislation for all of the workers that worked inside of the hotels that we were building that received public subsidy. We skated around the legislation in Harrisburg that didn't allow and doesn't allow municipalities to work around any issue of commerce by tying it to the subsidy and being able to make it a prevailing wage and not a change to the minimum wage, which also is covered by the state. It got to the point where the governor, Rendell, a Democrat, sent his Secretary of Economic Development to meet with me to ask me to pull that legislation, and I wouldn't. And when I explained to him what the benefit would be and where the costs would be incurred, they understood that the developers who were complaining were off their rocker.
This is the prevailing wage piece, okay.
Yeah, we were able to pass the first Clean Water Act in the city's history and the second Clean Air Act in the city's history. And we were able to pass campaign finance reform, lobbyist disclosure, lobbyist registration, ending no-bid contracts. And we did what a true progressive agenda was. We took care of the environment, we took care of the people, and we took care of reforming city government. And through those actions, that group, then in 2013, helped to elect me to be the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. And that group doesn't really exist as it had back then, but there is no doubt that what exists today would not have existed had not we taken on those battles in 2008. That was the formation of where you see us today. And that was only through taking on the scars and the body blows of being able to create something such as that. We were very successful in being able to create an entirely new agenda for city council that today you're seeing county council 15 years later taking on the same issues that we passed.
And who are the inheritors of, back then it was Pittsburgh United. I'm not sure if they still exist or they've sort of morphed into other organizations, some of the same people, do you know?
No, a lot of the people that were involved then are my age, some are older, some less, but the people who created all of those organizations, for the most part, are no longer leading those organizations.
Okay.
It's a youthful movement that is the next iteration. It's the next step forward, and they're going to push the ball further, and that's good. That's what progress is. But to believe that it just started in 2016 and to deny that there were those that came before. That wasn't something that we would have ever done. We praise those that helped to get us to that point, and then we look to enhance upon their work.
I did not hear those denials, but I believe you that someone must be taking credit for that. I'm going to let you go in half a second, but I just wanted to throw one more out here. Who do you like in the race for Allegheny County Executive?
I'm not getting involved in that. I'm done with politics. Yeah.
Oh, good. Congratulations.
No, it's trust me, it's easy. I'm supporting, and
Do you want to pick that up?
You know what? I think. Let me see. There you are. I have to make that call in a minute. So, Bob Charland, I think, will make a wonderful councilman. I think Boda will be surprising people down in Lawrenceville and Morningside and Polish Hill. I'm supporting Rachel Heisler. I've known her since basically 2007, 2008, back when she was working for Jason Altmeyer, and the work that she's done in fiscal management throughout her entire career, I think will make her one of the best controllers that we've had. And, for the most part, in the county exec race, I'm staying out. In the other races, obviously, I'm supporting Corey O'Connor, but I think that, there's a different group. And I told Fitz this basically when I got in. I said, we're going to be the last of this group. It's going to be Mike and Wayne and Jay and you and me, and it's not going to be the children and the grandchildren of Italian, Irish, and Jewish folks that came to the city to work in the mills and the mines. It's going to be their children and their children's children who are going to be taking it over. So the politics of today is different than what I got in, and I have no regrets about any of the work that I did, and I certainly am proud of it. But it's a different animal, and it's one that is not for me. And I just hope that those that have chosen to seek public service can make sure that they remember that at the end of the day, it's not about the different minuscule ideal changes that you want to see, but it's, are you helping people? And have you done everything, even if it's not in the orthodox ways of the past, in order to be able to get people the help that they need directly?
Yeah. Well, on that note, Mr. Peduto, we will endeavor to keep this space as safe a space as possible. Maybe a little more of an old school vibe as far as the conversation. I hope, I did a decent job for my first time today, but now that you have the address, if you ever see me fiddling around on here, you can just pop in the green room. I'll see you. I say something silly or wrong or whatever, just pop in and say hello. Don't be a stranger. Enjoy your evening in the spring and summer, and the election in 3 weeks.
Shall do, Bram. Look forward to seeing you soon, and let me know when the edited version's up so I can share it with folks.
That'll do. Thank you, Mr. Peduto. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
And one of these days we'll have ending music when we do this, but dun, 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 dun. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'll see you soon. Oh, stick around. Possibly later on tonight we're going to have another candidate for office. I don't want to announce them because we haven't firmed it up yet, but bookmark the channel. We're going to be throwing up some more stuff like that and more stuff that is just silly and on my own. But once again, we thank Mr. Peduto for taking the time. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.